So, let me tell you about the biggest mess of my life because honestly, everyone's acting like I'm some kind of monster, and I need someone to hear my side of this disaster. I'm Chloe, I'm 26, and 3 weeks ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Wedding dress hanging in my closet, honeymoon booked, this adorable little girl who calls me mama, and a fiance who seemed perfect on paper. But apparently, the universe had other plans. Here's what nobody understands about Christian: he's always been the overthinking type. Like, seriously, this man will spend 20 minutes analyzing which brand of pasta to buy at the grocery store. I used to think it was cute, but lately it was driving me absolutely crazy because he'd been acting weird for months, asking all these random questions about when I got pregnant with Lizzie, wanting exact dates and times, like he was building some kind of timeline in his head. And honestly, it was starting to really annoy me because who remembers every single detail from 2 years ago? I mean, I was going through a lot back then, dealing with my own stuff, figuring out my life. The last thing I needed was him interrogating me like I was on trial for something, but he'd get all quiet and moody whenever I'd tell him he was being dramatic about it. What really got under my skin was how he started treating me differently. Before all this weirdness began, Christian was always so interested in my day, always wanting to know where I was going, who I was with. It was sweet at first, but then it started feeling suffocating. Like I couldn't even run to the store without him wanting a full report when I got back. But lately, he'd been distant, coming home late from work, barely talking during dinner. And when I tried to find out what was going on with him, suddenly I was the controlling one for wanting to know where my fiance was spending his time. The double standard was insane. He could disappear for hours and give me some vague answer about work or whatever, but God forbid I don't answer my phone on the first ring. I started checking his phone more often because something felt off. And yeah, I know that sounds bad, but couples shouldn't have secrets from each other, right? Especially when one person is acting all sketchy and weird. I never found anything suspicious though, which almost made it worse because then I couldn't figure out what his actual problem was. I tried talking to my friend Jessa about it, and she kept saying maybe he was just stressed about the wedding and get cold feet, it's normal, all that stuff. But this felt different. This felt like he was pulling away from me and Lizzie. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit because despite all his annoying habits and his tendency to overthink literally everything, Christian was supposed to be my security blanket. Looking back now, I can see he was probably building up to something. There were signs I chose to ignore because I didn't want to deal with whatever drama he was cooking up in that overactive brain of his, like how he started asking about my old job, wanting to know about coworkers and if I still talked to anyone from there, or how he'd get this weird look on his face when people would comment on how much Lizzie looked like me and not him. The thing is, I've always been good at compartmentalizing. When things get complicated, I just focus on what's in front of me and deal with the rest later. It's how I survived my early 20s and managed to build a decent life for myself despite some questionable choices along the way. I never thought that skill would work against me, but apparently some people see it as being dishonest or secretive when really I call it being practical. So when Christian started getting all weird and distant, I figured it would blow over like everything else. Men go through phases, right? They get stressed about commitment or money or work, and then they snap out of it. I wasn't about to let his emotional issues derail our entire future together. We had a wedding, a plan, a daughter to raise, a life to build, but clearly I completely underestimated how deep his paranoia had gotten because what happened next blindsided me so hard. I'm still trying to process it. The person I trusted most in the world had been plotting behind my back for months, and when the truth finally came out, it changed absolutely everything. The day everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday. And then I was getting Lizzie ready for daycare, trying to find matching socks because somehow we only ever have one of each pair. And Christian was in the kitchen making coffee, except he wasn't making his usual small talk about work or asking what I had planned for the day. He was just standing there staring at his phone with this expression I'd never seen before. "We need to talk when you get home tonight," he said without even looking at me. Just like that. No explanation, no hint about what was going on. I tried to get more information out of him, but he just kept saying we'd discuss it later and acting like everything was normal, except nothing felt normal. The way he kissed me goodbye was different, like he was already somewhere else in his head. I spent the entire day at work distracted, wondering what could be so important that he couldn't just tell me right then. My mind kept racing through possibilities. Maybe he wanted to postpone the wedding. Maybe he was having doubts about getting married so young. Maybe he was stressed about money. I texted him a few times throughout the day, but his responses were short and weird. When I got home that evening, Christian was sitting at our kitchen table with a folder in front of him. A folder like this was some kind of business meeting instead of a conversation between two people who are supposed to be planning their wedding in 3 weeks. The sight of it made me defensive immediately because who brings paperwork to a relationship discussion? "Sit down," he said, and his voice was completely flat. No emotion, no warmth, nothing. I sat across from him and I waited for him to explain himself, but he just stared at me for what felt like forever. Finally, he opened the folder and pulled out some official looking documents. "I got a paternity test done," he said, sliding the papers across the table. "Lizzie isn't mine." I swear, for a second, I thought I misheard him, because there's no way someone would get a paternity test behind their partner's back. That's not something normal people do. That's something crazy, paranoid people do, but there was in black and white some lab results with percentages and scientific language. My first instinct was to attack because honestly, what he did was a complete violation of trust. Are you serious right now? You went behind my back and had my daughter tested like she's some kind of evidence in a crime scene. I could feel my voice getting louder, but I didn't care. He had crossed a line that I didn't even know existed. "Your daughter," he repeated, like those words meant something significant. Interesting choice of words. "She's our daughter, Christian. She's been our daughter for over a year. You're the only father she's ever known." I was trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was panicking. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Except I'm not her father. The test proves it. 0% chance of paternity. So I need you to tell me who is," the way he was looking at me like I was some stranger he'd caught lying made me want to scream. This was Christian, the man who sang lullabies to Lizzie when she was colicky, who got up for middle of the night feedings without complaining, who had spent over a year being an amazing father, and now he was acting like none of that mattered because of some stupid test. "I can't believe you're doing this," I said, trying to make him see how crazy he was being. You're destroying our family over what? Some paranoid suspicion? Some feeling you had?" "I'm not destroying anything, Chloe. I'm just dealing with the reality that you've been lying to me for 2 years." His voice was still that same flat tone, like he was discussing the weather instead of our entire relationship. "I never lied to you about anything," I shot back, and that was the truth. I mean, I never specifically told him he was Liz's biological father, but I never said he wasn't either. When I found out I was pregnant, Christian was the one who stepped up. He was the one who wanted to be involved. "So you're telling me you honestly believed I was the father this whole time?" he asked. And there was something in his voice that made me realize this was a trap. Whatever I said next was going to be used against me. "I thought you could be," I said carefully. "I mean, we were together during that time. It made sense," which was true. We were together, maybe not exclusively, but we were definitely involved. "Could be," he repeated. "So there were others." The way he said it made me feel dirty, like I was some kind of cheater, instead of a single woman who was dating around before she got serious with someone. "Christian, this was before we were even official. We weren't exclusive. We weren't anything serious yet. But you let me believe I was the father. You let me fall in love with a child that isn't mine. You let me plan a future based on a lie." Now, there was emotion in his voice, but it wasn't the kind I wanted to hear. It was hurt and anger and something that sounded like disgust after that initial confrontation, I thought maybe if I gave Christian some space to cool down, he'd come to his senses and realize how ridiculous he was being. I mean, we had a wedding in 3 weeks. We had deposits down, family flying in, a honeymoon booked. You don't just throw all of that away over some DNA test. But the next morning, I woke up to find him gone, not just gone to work early, but gone and gone. His clothes were missing from the closet. His toiletries were cleared out of the bathroom. And there was a note on the kitchen counter saying he was staying somewhere else while he figured things out. No phone number, no address, nothing. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I texted him. No response. I even called his work, but they said he'd taken some personal time off. It was like he just disappeared from the face of the earth, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of his breakdown by myself. The worst part was having to explain to people why he wasn't around. I couldn't exactly tell everyone that he'd gotten a secret paternity test and found out Lizzie wasn't his biological daughter. That would just create more drama and make everyone start asking questions I didn't want to answer. So I started telling people he was having some pre-wedding stress and needed a few days to clear his head. My mom bought it because she's always said men get weird before big commitments. But Jessa was more suspicious, especially when I couldn't give her any details about where he was staying or when he was coming back. She kept pushing for more information, and finally I snapped and told her the whole story. Wait, so Lizzie might not be his? She asked, and I could hear the judgment in her voice immediately. Chloe, please tell me you didn't let him think he was the father if you weren't sure. I didn't let him think anything, I said defensively. We were together when I got pregnant. He was a possibility. I never claimed he was definitely the father, but you also never told him he might not be. She pointed out like she was some kind of relationship expert. That's a pretty big thing to leave out, but Jessel wasn't buying it. Chloe, who else could be the father? Because if you're not sure, that means there were other guys around the same time. I didn't want to get into details, but she kept pressing until I finally admitted there were 2 other possibilities, maybe 3 if I was being completely honest. But it's not like I was keeping track or anything. I was 24, single, and dating. Oh my God, Jessa said, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. Chloe, you have to tell them. These guys have a right to know they might have a daughter. I hung up on her. I couldn't believe my best friend was attacking me like that, making me sound like some kind of gold digger or manipulator. That's not what happened at all. I didn't trick Christian into anything. He made his own choices about being involved with me and Lizzie. I started calling family members and close friends, giving them a version of events that made Christian look like the bad guy. I told them he was having some kind of mental breakdown, that he was being paranoid and controlling, that he was trying to destroy our family over some crazy suspicions. The first potential father was easy to track down because we'd stayed in touch on social media. When I messaged him asking if we could talk, he seemed surprised but agreed to meet for coffee. So what's going on? He asked when we met up, and I could tell he was nervous. I need to tell you something, I said, and then I launched into the whole story about Christian and the paternity test and how everything was falling apart. I tried to make it sound like I was just as shocked as everyone else. His reaction was not what I expected. Instead of being sympathetic or supportive, he got this look on his face like I just told him I had a contagious disease. Wait, so you're saying I might be the father of your kid? He asked, and the way he said it made it sound like the worst possible thing that could happen to him. It's possible, I said carefully. I mean, we were together around that time, but I'm not asking you for anything. I just thought you should know what was going on. The conversation went downhill from there. He started talking about getting his own paternity test, about maybe wanting joint custody if Lizzie was his, about how I should have told him from the beginning. By the time I left that coffee shop, I was more convinced than ever that I'd made the right choice by not telling these guys about the pregnancy originally. The paternity test results came back 2 weeks later and he wasn't the father. He seemed almost relieved, which annoyed me because he'd spent weeks talking about his rights and responsibilities. But as soon as he was off the hook, he couldn't get away from the situation fast enough. The second potential father was someone I'd really hoped I wouldn't have to contact. We'd had a brief thing that ended badly, and I hadn't spoken to him in over 2 years. When I called him, he was suspicious from the start. Chloe, why are you calling me? I thought we agreed to keep our distance from each other. So I told him the whole story right there on the phone. I tried to make it sound like I was just as surprised as everyone else about the situation, but I could tell he wasn't buying it. Let me get this straight, he said after I finished. You've been raising a kid for over a year, and you're just now figuring out that the guy you were with might not be the father. That doesn't make sense, Chloe. Are you willing to take a paternity test or not? I asked, cutting to the chase. I guess, he said after a long pause, but I'm not promising anything beyond that. The paternity test process was awkward and uncomfortable. He showed up to the appointment looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, barely acknowledged Lizzie, and made it clear he was only there because he felt obligated. The results came back positive. He was Ellis's biological father. And suddenly, everything got 10 times more complicated because now I had to deal with someone who had legal rights to my daughter, but who is essentially a stranger to both of us. So what now? He asked when I called to tell him the results. I mean, I guess I need to figure out how to be a father to a kid I don't know. You don't have to do anything, I said, hoping he'd just walk away like the first guy did. She's fine. She's taken care of, but she's my daughter, he said, and there was something in his voice that made me nervous. I can't just pretend she doesn't exist now that I know about her. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be as simple as I'd hoped. He wasn't going to just quietly disappear and let me handle things on my own. His name was Marcus, and he wanted to be involved, which meant my life was about to get even more complicated. Marcus started wanting to be involved immediately, like the day after we got the test results, he was texting me about visitation schedules and asking when he could meet Lizzie properly. It was overwhelming because I wasn't ready for any of this. And more importantly, Lizzie definitely wasn't ready for it. She doesn't even know you exist. I tried to explain to him during one of our phone calls, you can't just show up and expect her to accept you as her father. Well, maybe that's something you should have thought about before you let another man raised my daughter for over a year, he said, and I could hear the anger in his voice. This whole situation could have been avoided if he'd been honest from the beginning. The first meeting between Marcus and Lizzie was a disaster. She hid behind my legs the entire time, wouldn't talk to him, and cried when he tried to pick her up. He kept trying to force interactions, bringing toys and treats like he could buy her affection, but she wanted nothing to do with him. This isn't working, I told him after he left. She's not ready for this. We're not waiting, he said firmly. I've already lost over a year with her. I'm not losing any more time. Things got even worse when he started talking about getting lawyers involved. He had done some research and found out that biological fathers have rights, even if they weren't involved from the beginning. He could petition for joint custody, for overnight visits, for a say in major decisions about Liz's upbringing. Meanwhile, Christian was completely absent from all of this. He wasn't helping with Liz's care. He wasn't contributing financially. He wasn't even checking in to see how she was doing. He just completely checked out of our lives while everyone else was trying to figure out how to rearrange them. 6 months later, my life had become a complete nightmare. Marcus had gotten a lawyer and petitioned for joint custody, and somehow the court had sided with him. Suddenly, I was sharing custody of my own daughter with someone who'd been a complete stranger less than a year ago. The custody arrangement was brutal. Lizzie spent every other weekend with him, plus one evening a week. And they were talking about expanding it to include overnight visits during the week. I went from being with my daughter every day to missing her for days at a time. But what made it even worse was watching how quickly Lizzie adapted to the situation. She stopped asking about Christian after a few months and started calling Marcus daddy like he'd been there all along. It was like she'd just forgotten about the man who'd raised her for the first year of her life. Marcus was actually good with her, which I'd been hoping he wouldn't be. He'd bought her a whole new wardrobe for his apartment, set up a bedroom that was nicer than the one she had at my place, and was constantly buying her toys and treats. It was like he was trying to prove he was the better parent. She doesn't need all this stuff. I told him when I saw the elaborate playroom he'd created for her, I want her to be comfortable here. He said, this is her home too. Now that phrase, her home too, made me want to throw up. My apartment was her home. I was her home. He was just some guy who'd shown up and decided he wanted to play father because biology said he had to. The situation got even worse when Marcus started dating someone new. Her name was Sarah, and she was everything I wasn't. Stable job, nice apartment, no baggage, no history of complicated relationships. And of course, Lizzie loved her immediately. The final straw came when Marcus petitioned the court for expanded custody, claiming that his living situation was more stable and that he could provide better care for Lizzie. He pointed out that he had a larger apartment, a higher income, and a supportive partner who could help with childcare. The custody hearing was a complete disaster. It started when Marcus' lawyer called Jessa as a witness. I couldn't believe my own best friend had agreed to testify against me, but apparently she'd been talking to Marcus' legal team for weeks. Can you tell the court about your conversations with Miss Chloe regarding the paternity of her daughter? The lawyer asked Jessa. She told me she knew there were multiple potential fathers, Jessa said, not meeting my eyes. She said she wasn't sure who the biological father was, but she let Christian believe he was the father because he was the most stable option financially. But it got worse. They'd somehow gotten access to my text messages and social media posts from around the time Lizzie was conceived. Messages where I'd complained about one of the potential fathers being too immature and another being broke all the time. Posts where I talked about wanting to find someone ready to settle down and financially secure. Reading those messages out loud in court made me sound calculating and cold, like I'd been shopping for a husband instead of just venting about dating frustrations. But taken out of context, they painted a picture of someone who deliberately targeted Christian because he met certain criteria. The worst part was when they brought up Christian, they tracked him down and gotten a statement from him about his side of the story. He described feeling betrayed and manipulated, talked about the emotional trauma of bonding with a child that wasn't his biological daughter, and explained why he'd felt he had no choice but to walk away from the relationship. I would have been willing to work things out if she'd been honest from the beginning, his statement said, but discovering that she deliberately kept me in the dark about paternity made me question everything about our relationship. I couldn't trust her anymore. The judge's decision was swift and brutal. Marcus was awarded primary custody of Lizzie, with me getting visitation every other weekend and one evening a week. I think the roles had been completely reversed, and suddenly I was the non-custodial parent fighting for scraps of time with my own daughter. The court finds that Mr. Marcus has demonstrated a commitment to providing stable, honest care for the child, the judge said. While the court does not question Miss Wicklo's love for her daughter, there are concerns about the deceptive practices that led to this situation. After the hearing, I tried to talk to Jessa to understand why she testified against me. I thought we were friends, I said. We are friends, she said. But she wouldn't look at me directly. That's why I had to tell the truth. Lizzie deserves better than this mess you created. I didn't create anything, I said desperately. I was just trying to do what was best for my daughter by lying to everyone involved, she asked. Chloe, you let a man fall in love with a child that wasn't his. You let him plan a future based on something that wasn't true. The transition to the new custody arrangement was horrible. Lizzie was confused about why she was suddenly living at Daddy's house most of the time and only visiting me on weekends, but kept asking when she could come home. And I had to try to explain that Daddy's house was her home now. Marcus tried to be diplomatic about the whole thing, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. He'd won. He'd gotten primary custody of his biological daughter, and I'd been relegated to weekend visitor status. He was playing the gracious winner, talking about how he wanted to co-parent effectively for Liz's sake. The worst part was that Lizzie seemed to be adjusting fine to the new arrangement. She was happy at Marcus's house, bonding with Sarah, building a life that didn't really include me anymore. I'd gone from being the center of her world to being a peripheral figure she saw on weekends. And through it all, Christian was still completely absent. He'd gotten his revenge by helping Marcus' legal team, but he wasn't stepping up to help raise the child he'd claimed to love so much. So he just walked away from all of us and moved on with his life like we'd never existed. Now I'm alone, broke, and barely able to see my own daughter. Everyone I trusted betrayed me, and somehow I'm supposed to accept that this is all my fault. But honestly, I still don't understand what I did. That was so terrible. I tried to build a stable life for my daughter with the resources I had available. How does that make me the villain in this story? Everyone keeps saying I should have been more honest, that I should have told all the potential fathers about the pregnancy from the beginning, but none of them were ready to be fathers back then. None of them would have been good partners or providers. Christian was the best choice, and I still don't understand why he couldn't see that. But apparently, wanting stability and security for your child makes you a manipulative liar in everyone else's eyes. And now I'm paying the price for trying to give Lizzie the best life possible. She's happy with Marcus and Sarah, building memories and relationships that don't include me. While I sit here wondering how everything went so wrong, the system failed me, my friends failed me, Christian failed me, and somehow I'm the one who's supposed to take responsibility for all of it. But you know what? I'm done apologizing for making the best decisions I could with the information I had. I'm done pretending that everyone else's feelings matter more than what was best for my daughter. I may have lost this battle, but I know the truth about what really happened here. And someday, when Lizzie is old enough to understand, maybe she'll see that everything I did was because I loved her and wanted to give her the best life possible, even if nobody else can see that right now.